we did this once in Sarajevo just a month ago, and I think what we discovered was very interesting. When we started thinking about this course in terms of doing comparative transitional justice, we were wondering what are the issues that might arise that lend themselves to comparative analysis, and will we find too many differences and too few similarities in thinking about transitional justice questions in the context of South Africa and the Balkans. And I think what we discovered is actually that there are a huge number of issues that can be interpreted and can be discussed and debated also in a comparative perspective.
The first thing, as we have seen, is that the field, the discourse, and the theory of transitional justice has evolved, transformed over decades. We can start at Nuremberg tribunals, or we can start even before that. But the point is that this field has transformed itself and has evolved over many decades. The second thing that we have seen is that transitional justice promises a lot. It promises to reform societies. It promises to reform individuals, both perpetrators and victims, but also it promises to change the states themselves, the countries or the states themselves. But finally, it promises to change the nature of international relations, how states relate to each other. So it's a field that covers a wide spectrum, promising a lot. Now, because of those two things, there's been some critiques that have evolved over time. There are a lot of critiques, but I think it's useful to group them into these three areas.
So the wars of Yugoslav disintegration started in 1991. Yugoslavia was a multinational and multi-ethnic country. It was a socialist country, even though its form of socialism was more open than many of the other communist countries, which were much more repressive and much more closed. The war in Yugoslavia started really with civil society, Yugoslav civil society, demanding a transformation of the relationship between state and society. In the 1980s in Yugoslavia, there was a burgeoning movement for women's rights, for gay rights, for environmental issues, conscientious objection to military service. And within that field of human rights, gender, and other pro-democracy movements, a very small minority were the nationalists. So in Croatia, which was one of the republics, there was a very small movement for Croatian independence from Yugoslavia.
So truly, there's a tendency to start with 1948, apartheid. But the conflicts in South Africa stem from way before 1948. And they really start with the genocide of the Khoisan people, the genocide of the so-called Hottentots, the so-called Bushmen people. So-called because, of course, they were made as if they were subhumans. So that's the first genocide. That's where we must start. And that's where we must begin and ask whether the TRC and post-conflict process in South Africa actually resolve this. For 100 years, from 1797 to 1897, we've got the wars of dispossession. 100 years. This is the longest wars fought in Africa. Colonial wars fought. And resistance wars, not just colonial, but also resistance. People resisted for 100 years.